There we go. Hello, Lisa. Hi. Yes, we'll have that meeting. We'll make it work. Jeez. Hello, everybody. Oh, Susie's here. Hi, Susie. Yeah. Oh, it's so nice. This is, Robert, this is my favorite part. Robert, you don't have your headphones on. It's hard to recognize you, except you've got your yellow sweater.
They're not working well, so I'm going to an alternative system.
Oh, I don't know I don't know why people use, I mean, I don't know. I don't need them. Are they better?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Elizabeth. We have some new people too? Got people from the course, from the CERT course, which is so great. When people find us in different ways. There's Merida. Yeah, wonderful. Hello, everybody. It's fun if you put where you are beside your name if you want to, or put it in the chat so we can get a sense of these far-reaching tentacles that we have out into the polyvagal world. Yeah. So today I'm so excited because we have George Thompson, who is the new chair of the Polyvagal Institute. So it's wonderful to have George with us. And George and I, luckily, we know each other actually in person, both at, I think I met you first in person at Potsdam, George, at our Polyvagal conference. And then we were together just very recently with Ruth Lanius and Frank Corrigan's work, Deep Brain Reorienting, if any of you know about that. It's just an incredible training, wasn't it, George?
Very awesome.
Very awesome with, yeah. And so that was 4 days. And then I think you went on to the next part of the training. We'll get into that. Maybe we'll do an embodied dialogue about deep brain reorienting. Yeah, I'll invite Ruth back again. Okay, so let's start the way we always start because it's an embodied dialogue, right? So we're going to spend some time listening to the body, welcoming what's happening. And of course, always check first to see whether your nervous system wants to slow things down this morning or this afternoon or the evening, wherever you are, and take a little journey inside. Or maybe it feels right for you just to kind of stay with what's happening in the room around you, which is completely fine and wonderful too. Right? Remember, we don't pathologize all that. We just say, oh yeah, bodies know what feels safe right now to do. So, okay, so just taking a minute here to settle in your chair, or again, listen to your body. You might want to stand up. It might feel really good to feel the weight of your body down into your feet and then down into the earth. And then just slowly checking to see, would it feel okay to soften your gaze? And then to gently bring your attention somewhere down into the center of your body. So here we are in our wonderful Felt Sense Polyvagal community where we have this beautiful shared understanding about the foundations of a sense of safety in the body. And so today, George and I are going to explore lots of different places. The process that I think holds it all together is about this capacity that we can share and learn about, of really deeply listening. So really deeply listening to what's happening inside you in neuroception, in how safe you feel in your body. And then our capacity to deeply listen to each other. And that means letting go of agendas and listening freshly, as 𝗘𝗺𝗀𝗃 would say. So I invite you to see if you can find a time in your life where you felt as though someone was really deeply listening to you. You really felt heard by this person. And then just notice what's happening in this experience. Where are you? A little bit about the story. And who is this person that's deeply listening to what's going on for you in your life? And then just notice how this experience is carried in your body. What part of your body is your attention drawn to in this experience of really being heard? And just breathing into that place. And you might want to just put a hand where you feel just the beginnings of a whole felt sense experience of really being deeply heard and understood. It's like this person really gets me. I feel seen. I feel accepted just for being me. And see if you can find a word or a phrase, a handle, we call this in focusing. A word or an image or a phrase or maybe a gesture in your body. Something that really captures the essence of this experience. Just asking into your body, into the felt sense. This moment of real co-regulation. And then just in step 5, we would ask into this felt sense, is there more about all of this experience? Something that's fresh and new that you didn't already know in your head. Just let your body show you. What does it feel like in my body when somebody really sees me? The me in here. And I can relax my body into this beautiful ventral state of co-regulation. And if I really relax into it, I can feel really safe. But then in just very gently and slowly beginning to round this off inside. Just maybe touching and wiggling your toes, feeling the earth below you. How the earth holds us up. We're not alone. And see if you can, as you kind of emerge back into our group, just holding on to this felt sense of deep listening. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Feels like we went way in there. I wonder if that's related to just coming out of COVID or something, but I felt like I really needed to take some time there. Yeah. Okay, so Rashawn, will you spotlight George and I, and we'll spend some time, and then we'll come back to all of you. So you can keep your questions and your comments and put some in the chat if you want. Hello.
Hey, Jan.
Hi. So George, I've introduced you in the role that I know you most as, which is the new chair of the Polyvagal Institute. But you're up to many things that you told me a bit about walking down Yonge Street. But what part of that do you want to really share about you right now?
Well, first, let me say that was such a lovely meditation. I really enjoyed that and love where you were able to take us inside. So who am I? What do I do? I'm a child psychiatrist. I'm the medical director for crisis services for an agency called Rediscover in Kansas City, Missouri. So we have a walk-in clinic for kids and adults. People can walk in from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 365 days a year if they're in crisis.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't
That's pretty incredible service.
It's very incredible. And the people at Rediscover that created this, I'm very much admire, and I'm very delighted to be working with them.
Wow, that's really uncommon, isn't it?
We're the first one in Kansas City that's doing this, and it's starting to be a thing in the U.S. There's some initiatives that are promoting that. So I think that it can give a felt sense of safety to a whole community to know there's a place that you can go in a crisis and get some help. That's a trustworthy place where you feel like you're in good hands.
Yeah, it's not a big sort of formal hospital setting, right?
No, we're a little building. We're building a bigger building because we need more space now. But
that's remarkable, really. How wonderful is that?
Because the choices for people in crisis are go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Hospitals aren't really designed for emotional or mental health emergencies.
Yeah.
Or to make an appointment with somebody, but that can be months down the road.
Exactly.
So we're in the gap between those two extremes.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And I also do other kinds of crisis work with Belinda Houle, who I think is on the call today, training community responders when they go out into the community to meet with people that are in various states of distress due to homelessness or mental health issues or substance use. So I teach polyvagal theory to those community responders.
Oh, wonderful.
And I've also started a online support community for parents called the Listening Parent Community, and talk about the role of deep listening in raising kids and forming a very secure bond with our kids that can be the foundation for everything else we do as parents.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are a few of the things that I'm up to in addition to the work that I do at the Polyvagal Institute.
Yeah, wonderful. So where should we start?
Let's see. So we could talk about the effect of deep listening on the nervous system.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah.
So a kind of therapy where I learned about polyvagal theory is called dyadic developmental psychotherapy.
Dan
Yeah, Dan Hughes model, right. And I chaired a conference in 2019 called Deep Listening, the power of deep listening to heal, connect, and transform. And deep listening really is a very powerful action. It may be one of the most powerful things that we can do as humans,
Yeah.
both when we deeply listen to ourselves, as you were just talking about and leading us through, and when we deeply listen to another person.
Mm.
It's my belief we have in the core of ourselves, and you are getting to this in your step 5, we have what makes us unique, our unique essence. What is our essential self? And I believe we come into this life with intentions and values and maybe even things that we came here to contribute. And so when you're asking that question, what do you notice in there now? We can notice new things. I'm 62 years old, and I notice new things emerging from my sense of self, even at this age. When I was a kid, I thought adults either had it all figured out or didn't, but that was the way it was.
Yeah.
And I was a bit of a strange kid. I read a child therapy book when I was about 10 called Dibs in Search of Self.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I know that book.
You know that book?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that really was what got me interested in being a child psychiatrist, a child and family therapist, and
Yeah.
really helping people to find their sense of self and take it out into the world.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we deeply listen either to ourselves or to each other, we help in this process of bringing who we are out into the world, which I think is the most creative and generative and generous things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's really through being able to listen inside that we really define who we are as self, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have that reflected back in the good parent, the parent that's really there. Not good as in good and bad, but yeah.
Yeah, the good enough parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll get into this, but research on attunement in parenting, uh, I was surprised. It showed that if we're attuned about 30% of the time, that's really good enough parenting.
Really?
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I I would have thought it was like, when I took a test in school, I needed at least 80% or 90% to get a B or an A. But it's more like baseball, American baseball. Um, a batting average of 300, which means you hit the ball 3 out of 10 times, puts you in the Hall of Fame. And that same turns out to be true of parenting. If
Wow.
you're attuned to your kids 30% of the time, you hit the ball 3 out of 10 times that you say something to your kid, you can be in the Hall of Fame of parenting. And that's what good enough parenting is.
And George, that really is so important for people to know because there's such a way in which parents, it's so easy to feel like a failure, and we're so judgmental about parents. And so realizing that, hey, 30% of the time is enough, is very uplifting for a parent to really take that in.
Right.
Yeah.
Because for parents say that their kids are their most important things in their lives, but then that means that the biggest threat to us are the things that happen in our role as parents.
Yeah.
So it not only is what we value the most, but what makes us the most vulnerable too.
Yeah.
And so that then creates a situation where if we don't get it quite right, it can feel really terrible for our
Real
nervous system. Yeah.
terrible, devastating. Yeah.
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 Um, I have a couple of slides, so maybe I'll go there and just because I know I invited some people to come that don't necessarily know so much about polyvagal theory.
Yeah, let's do it.
Is that all right if I
It's
share?
always great to review and go over polyvagal theory. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so in polyvagal theory, as many of us know, Stephen Porges, who created this theory, said that our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, can be in one of 3 states. And then we can have blended states between them. But here are the 3 main states. Most of us have heard of fight or flight. And this is a boy that is probably in fight and not flight. And that's a sympathetic nervous system state where we have adrenaline going through our veins and it makes our heart beat faster. We breathe faster. We have more oxygen and more glucose in our blood, prepares us to run, hit, and defend ourselves. We can protect ourselves in fight or flight. We also have a response that's related to playing possum called freeze or shutdown. And this is a fainting response at its most extreme. It can be related to dissociation, where one of the branches of the vagus, the older branch, the dorsal vagus branch, comes online and causes a decrease in heart rate, decrease in blood pressure. And it protects us by putting us into a state where we're hiding or we're frozen, because predators look for motion. And when we're frozen, then predators don't see us. There was an article in the New York Times not too long ago talking about sexual assault and the freeze response.
Mhm.
And one of the things it mentioned was that a story of a woman hiking in the woods and a bear dropped out of a tree in front of her. Now, this wasn't something that I even knew was possible going on a hike, that a bear could drop out of a tree in front of you. So I have one more thing to add to my list of things to be afraid of. She froze and the bear walked away. It didn't see her. So it saved her life to go into that freeze response. The thing that I really find fascinating about Steve Porges' work is that he said, what state are we in if we're not in fight or flight or freeze shutdown? And I've been to medical school and I've taken biology courses, but I've never heard somebody ask that question before. And so we have this other state, which he calls social engagement or the relaxed engaged state. When things are safe around us, then we can connect with each other and we can work together. We can nurture our children. And in this state, actually, we have what Dan Hughes and John Balin call our caregiving brains, and they come online. And so one of the keys to attuned parenting or being a listening parent is, what can we do to help ourselves feel safe enough and supported enough, like the meditation you did, so that we really can connect with each other. So these are the three states of the polyvagal theory. And then there's some blended states that can go between them, but that's a basic kind of idea. And one of the things as parents that we can do is we can listen to our child's nervous system and find out what is the state that they're in. It's a different kind of listening than listening to the story of what did you do today? Because they could tell us the same story, but they could tell it from different states. They could be upset by the story, or they could be okay with the story. They might have worked through it. And if we know the state they're in, that's going to give us some clues about how to parent in that moment. So I'm going to show another slide that gives us some ideas about that relates to self-attitudes, what I call self-attitudes. And this comes from the work of a woman named Ruth Culver in the UK, who's an IFS therapist, but also integrates internal family systems with polyvagal theory in some interesting ways. And she said that when we're in that freeze shutdown state, which happens when we're in really dangerous situations of inescapable threat, that the self attitude or the self state is a state of I can't. So in that freeze state, like the woman who froze when the bear fell out of the tree, she couldn't move. And for people that have been assaulted, they can't move, they can't run, they can't fight, they can't scream. And that's part of what an adaptive response is in that state, that it puts you in a state where you're not going to do something that makes you a target for a predator. The other part of it that she says is that it can also cause a state of I hurt. And so when we're under threat like that, then we can experience physical pain and emotional pain. I find it interesting to think about, because then if my child or my friend or myself is in a state of I can't, it starts to give me a backwards direction I can go and think, oh, they're in shutdown, and there must be something threatening to them. And it gives me something else I can do, is to find out what's going on that's put them into that shutdown state. We'll talk more about that in a minute. In the danger, this fight or flight state, Ruth says that we can go into the self-attitude of I must. I added you must for a person that works with kids. Sometimes when our kid is in a fight or flight state, they are in a state of you must. They tell me, Dad, you must do this. You need to do that right now. And that's how they're going to feel better. Or I'll sometimes tell people that I get into a state of I must, like I must send this email right now, which whenever I'm in I must send this email, it is never a good idea that I send that email, because my thinking brain is not engaged when I'm in fight or flight, and I have not developed a thoughtful response to whatever I feel like I need to answer right away. But in the safe state, when we're regulated and engaged, the social engagement state, the new vagus, the ventral vagus, then Ruth says that we have a feeling of I can. And when I check in with myself, and when we can all check in with ourselves after we did your lovely exercise, did we feel more empowered? That was one of the things that came to mind, was a word, power, when I felt what you had guided us to feel. And I had that feeling of I can. They're much more capable from that. Steve Porges had a very interesting interview with Fast Company magazine talking about, do you work in a mammalian or a reptilian business environment? And so he was talking about the mammalian environment as this safe, regulated, engaged environment, and a fight or flight environment is more reptilian. But he said something interesting. He said, for a company to be innovative, it has to be a safe working environment, that we can't take risks unless we feel safe enough. And so that's where I can comes in. And Ruth also adds I am into this state as well. And that's where she talks about this core sense of self, which is our essential self, or even we could think of it as our soul, if that word resonates. And this is a beingness state rather than the doingness state of I can, where we're being, enjoying, connecting, and just existing as the lovely beings that we all are. So when I think about parenting now, and I'm thinking about these three states and these attitudes, then I realize that if I want to help my child feel more capable, or to connect with who they are more, like that book, 𝗏𝗏 in Search of Self, then I need to help them feel safe and regulated. That's what's going to help them feel like they're capable. If I go back when they're in the I can't state, and I try and discuss, argue, cajole, be rational about it, and tell them, well, look at it this way. You've done it before, or that kind of thing. Their brain state is what's producing those thoughts that they can't do it. But if I help their nervous system get to safe, regulated, and engaged, then automatically what will emerge is I can and I am. So that's what I'm really working on then with parents, is how do you listen to your child in a way, because deep listening is a signal of safety for the nervous system. Really being seen and heard is a signal of safety for the nervous system. And so that deep listening, you like that? This is my favorite thing that I ever did on PowerPoint, is to make that flat. That lifts us up to the safe, regulated, and engaged state, and puts us into that new mindset. So I'll stop sharing for a moment. I have one more slide in a minute, but I thought this would be a good time to then see what else you wanted to ask her.
Yeah.
sense what I'm saying there?
Yeah, and I love the way you're explaining. I think we all have different ways of talking about polyvagal theory,
Mhm.
and we all learn from each other how we're doing it, right? And it's so important to be able to break it down and make it really simple because it can be very complex. Uh,
Well,
yeah.
and putting on my hat as the chairman of the board of the directors of the Polyvagal Institute, one of the things that PVI really wants to do is to empower people to apply polyvagal theory to their work, to their life, to their community.
Mhm.
Because when people do that, we just see brilliant things happening all around the planet.
Yeah.
There are now 15 different international affiliates to the Polyvagal Institute, which is
Yeah.
just so awesome.
Yeah, it's really great. I know I got something from Randall the other day about a book that someone's writing about polyvagal theory and architecture. And first you might think, what? Then of course it makes total sense. The spaces that we create that are reflective of our need for safety, right? And not walls,
Yeah.
borders, and but cues of safety that are socially engaged and soft and colorful and playful and all of those things. Bring people together. Yeah.
I was at a seminar on entrepreneurship yesterday, and I
Hmm.
heard a quote from Winston Churchill that went along with that. He said something like, "We design our buildings, and then our buildings design us." Um, it
So
has
true.
that impact, that if we design spaces where we're not face to face anymore, then that has an impact on us. If we design buildings where we feel disconnected from each other, we feel unsafe, or if we feel safe, it's going to have an impact on our nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. And also things like windows, I remember reading a study actually where, patients improved in terms of their hospital stays when they were in rooms that had windows. We are connected to the natural world. We forget that we live in our bodies.
We forget we have our animal nature as well as
Yeah,
our mental nature and our spiritual nature.
yeah, yeah. So George, do you want to share I'm curious, what's the next one?
Yeah, so this talks about the an order of things, and I call this uh, the trust building sequence.
Hmm.
And because trust building is really important, and trust is related to deep listening as well as the nervous system. So, how much a person trusts you, I think, depends on how many times or how much you've demonstrated that you understand their experience. So, this is what we were just doing is we were doing deep listening,
Yeah,
and deep listening really demonstrates that we understand another person's experience. And I'll
yeah,
just say a couple of things about that is that one is that um, we do this both verbally but also non-verbally. When we make little sounds like you've been doing that with me. Yeah. Um,
hmm.
see,
I just
that's
did it.
that's the way that we connect with each other. And you show that you're still with me. I think that we have a sense inside ourselves that we should take turns when we're communicating. And in deep listening, we want the other person to be able to know that they have permission to keep going. I want to know even more about you today than usual. So I need to say, it's still your turn. And so those little sounds or asking questions about what they're saying, tell me more, go on, what was that like? All of those things let them know I'm still interested. I still want it to be your turn. And so you keep going that way. Um, so that's one of the things about deep listening. Now, I used to think that this curve looked like this, that I would listen some, demonstrate I understood their experience. That would build a little trust. I'd listen a little bit more. That would build a little more trust. Listen a little more, build a little bit more trust. But now I think that it looks like this. I listen some more. And it may not seem like anything is happening, especially if I'm talking with a kid, a teenager, a kid that's really upset, a person that's really upset, or in that work where Belinda's company trains the Albuquerque, the Department of Community Safety, to go out with people with a long trauma history. Their nervous systems aren't trusting just right off the bat. It needs to go on for a while. And what builds that sense of trust is listening to understand. And what happens, I think, is then we do what I call crossing the threshold of mistrust. I think somewhere in our nervous system, there's an assessment that says, is this person for me or against me? Or am I a member of their tribe or not a member of their tribe?
Mm.
Are we on the same team or are we not on the same team? And that when there is that crossing of the threshold of mistrust, then trust really goes up, and it happens all of a sudden. It happens really quickly, and then at that point, things really change in the relationship. And so I'm always looking to see, am I on the left side of the threshold of mistrust or the right side? On the left side, I'm listening to understand, as I was saying before, because listening to understand says your experience is important to me. Who you are as a person is important. What's happening deep inside of yourself, I really care about that. And when I care about that, that sends signals of safety and trust to their nervous system.
Mhm.
And then when we get to that threshold of mistrust, then I can actually pivot from trust building to something different, collaborating. I can take action, and I can do problem solving. And if I'm working with a kid, say in a residential facility, I'm the medical director of a couple of residential facilities for kids that need a safe place to live while they're healing from their trauma. And those kids may have a big upset. If I try and do problem solving over here on the left side of the threshold of mistrust, it's just experienced as more threat to them.
Yeah.
But if their nervous system has now come into social engagement on the right side, then a lot of times the kid will say, Dr. George, do you think that if I draw a picture for Mr. Joey, he'll forgive me for throwing my shoe at him? They'll come up with their own solutions to it. And again, we're going, well, I call this a state then of trust beyond doubt, because we don't have to think about the trust anymore for that moment. Something could happen and it puts us back on the left side and we just go through the steps again.
Yeah.
But for the time being, we don't have to, we can count on this relationship. That may last for a minute, it may last for an hour, it may last for a week. And so we've gone from I can't to I can. So, and also for people on the call, if you want to download a copy of this diagram, if you go to 𝗃𝑠𝑠.club, you can download a free copy of this as a PDF. Because I just love this chart. It really guides me these days. If I'm with somebody and things aren't going well, I'm thinking, what side of the threshold of mistrust am I on?
Mm-hmm.
And your exercise too reminds me, Jan, that we can be on the left or the right side of the threshold of mistrust with regard to ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I was talking about sending that email, if I'm in fight or flight, I'm on the left side of the threshold of mistrust with regard to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I listen deeply to myself as to what's going on, it puts me back onto the right side. And now I can trust myself to either send the email or not, or to revise it so that I'm actually saying the right thing, so that what comes out of that email is something constructive, productive, collaborative, that builds peace rather than builds conflict.
Yeah. I love this, George. And I first saw it when I came to your class in the certificate course, the polyvagal certificate course. And I got really excited about it because it speaks to me in terms of my Felt Sense Polyvagal Model. Because what I think you're describing with this threshold is what in focusing we would call the felt shift in the body. And in that felt shift, you have this experience of a kind of physical release and a relaxing and a change in how you think about the situation. And this happens through the 6 steps of focusing if you're able to deeply listen to yourself and to your body. And
I was so happy to hear
yeah,
when you first told me that, because I didn't even know that I hadn't heard of focusing before.
yeah, yeah,
And to realize, oh, there's people that have been working on this and have
yeah,
so much experience and language about it.
yeah,
It was so encouraging to find fellow threshold of mistrusters, trust building sequence, felt sense shift people
yeah,
in the world.
exactly. And what it really demonstrates is that the felt shift in the body is a natural interoceptive response in the body. It's not, that's why when people talk about focusing as a technique, it's like it can be a technique, but the felt sense in the body is just the natural way that the body moves towards ventral energy if you give it what it needs, is what Jen would say. And so you're describing right here this exact process of, on the left, you've got in a situation, people, even so you don't really know a person very well. And so even if you're feeling pretty grounded, there's a part that might be kind of a little bit sympathetic in there, especially if you're working with a client, right? And you're
Right.
the client or you're the therapist because you want to make that connection. And then as that safety and trust builds, you reach this kind of threshold that you're pointing out. There's a felt shift into ventral.
Exactly. And
Body physically releases. Gendlin talked about this, and this is what I went to Steve with and said, I think this felt shift we're talking about is a shift in the autonomic state. And he
there's
said,
a,
yeah,
yeah, there's a neurologist at Harvard that studied skin galvanic response. So you put
yeah,
a electrode on the skin,
yes,
which is a measure of your autonomic state, and
yeah,
tracks 2 people and shows the same kind of thing happening between 2 people, where they come into synchrony with each other. Their up and down waves of activation synchronized, and he says it happens all of a sudden. And in studying groups, the same thing happens when people become vulnerable enough with each other. Then they start to be able to then go into ventral vagal together, we would say.
yeah.
Uh, and then they trust each other, and then they start collaborating in a whole different way.
Yeah. And you know what's cool is that Jenlin, who was a student of Carl Rogers, who I'm sure you know, big famous, big
Right.
man too, psychologist in the States. He's dead now. They both are, but they saw that in the body. They saw and they studied galvanic skin response and even heart rate variability. So when I found those studies, it was like, of course, yes. I mean, we're tapping into something that is neurobiological. It's there in us, in our bodies.
It is. And so when our kid comes home from school and they're in an upset, we're probably on the left side of the threshold of mistrust. Doesn't mean they don't trust us, but they might not trust us with this particular situation yet.
Yeah.
And so if we listen to understand, I'm so tempted. I'm a dang child psychiatrist and I'm a man and I want to solve the problem, but I need to listen to understand. Tell me what it's like. That sounds awful. What was that like for you? That was your best friend. Holy cow. You must have been so surprised when they said that.
Yeah.
Making those kind of comments, or the kinds of sounds that we make with each other. Oh, ow. Those kinds of things uh, really help to build safety and trust with our child's nervous system in that moment. And then there's maybe a moment when there's a shift. And I don't know if this is something too, probably so, that you've noticed. The way I notice my child is shifted now these days is that I have a felt shift in myself listening to them. And
Yeah.
that gives me a clue that they've had their felt shift too.
Yeah. We call that the relational felt shift
See, I knew you knew that.
or co-regulation. But yes, yes, we're speaking the same. And it's exciting, right? Because it tells us, oh, there's something we're really tapping into here about being human.
You know, I gave a talk at Notre Dame in April, and I started off by saying human survival is not guaranteed, but neither is our extinction. And, the world is polarized in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
But we have the biological equipment to kill each other, all of us. We can all kill each other so that there's no humans left. But we also have the biological equipment to fly a remote control helicopter on Mars. And this morning I watched a documentary on the James Webb Space Telescope and all the billions of dollars that were spent, but the 10,000 people that worked on it. And when we're on the right-hand side of the threshold of mistrust, we fly helicopters on Mars and we launch space telescopes that allow us to see to the deepest edges of our universe. And so if we know that we have this biology, and we now know from focusing, from Felt Sense Polyvagal, from the trust building sequence, how to get from the left to the right, then it's a matter of teaching enough people about it and supporting each other to get there.
That's right.
So that we can collaborate and problem solve together. Because nothing can stop us as humans when we're on the right side of the threshold of mistrust.
That's totally true. Yeah. All right. Let's go back to our group. That was great. I love this. Wonderful. Okay, so let's go back to gal review so we can see everybody. All right. So questions, comments you want to share with George?
Look at all those smiling faces.
I know. Cues of safety. Yeah, and we've got a nice group too. We've got 83 people here. That's a really good, turnout these days. People are so fatigued with being on the screen, but I have to say our community is really, I think, really passionate about the work that we do. And that's really important these days.
It's very important work that you're doing, and especially, Jan, the way that you teach people to embody their sense of safety.
Yeah.
If we just think about it, we don't get there, and then we feel bad. But if we embody it, like you're teaching people, then we get there and we feel much better.
Yeah. Then the change is real and it sustains. But that's really, I love that way you've built that threshold in there like that. Can I use your slide? I'll give you credit, of course.
Absolutely. It'll be
let's bring it into the teaching. Yeah, because that's nice too, because it shows how what Jenna would say, we're crossing our areas and bringing them together, which helps people to really then develop concepts and theories in an even bigger way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have comments, questions? I'm sure you do. What's going on in there for us?
So Jan, it looks like Barbara raised her hand.
Barbara, yeah. Hello, Barbara. I recognize you.
I see in the chat the same similar question that I had. Are there professionals using polyvagal theory to facilitate dialogue among conflicted groups? I mean, this is what I keep coming back to. What attracted me to polyvagal theory was really that this is a way of finding peace, of creating peace, of anchoring ourselves in peace. And by peace, I mean, that creative, connected, all the beauty, safety. But I think in terms of groups, I keep going back to, is this something that we can stretch into, larger groups, into conflicts around the world? I know, and that the Austin Riggs Psychiatric Center groups grew out of that, of the studies whose psychoanalysts started then working to mediate internationally. There's the International Dialogue Group. And I keep hoping that this is going to happen through the Polyvagal Institute. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Barbara, yeah, you speak my language, and I trained at a sister facility to the Austin Riggs Clinic at the Menninger Clinic. and did the group training, I think that you're talking about, T groups or beyond groups as well. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, I led community building workshops started by Scott Peck, whose book is up there, The
yeah,
Road
yeah.
Less Traveled. His book, The Different Drum, is about community building and peace.
Yeah.
And I just had dinner on Tuesday night with a colleague here who teaches conflict resolution and diversity kinds of things at Georgetown University. And we were actually talking about that. And so I talked to Susie, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Polyvagal Institute on yesterday, maybe Susie, I can't remember what day we talked. It was yesterday or the day before about that. And I think, you know, what the Polyvagal Institute, you know, we're not geared to solve international conflicts, but we are geared to be able to inform how they get solved. And one of the things I would say is, we know from the nervous system that when there's a solution that leaves one group feeling safer and another group feeling more in danger, that's not a stable situation, because the people that have nervous systems that are in danger are going to need to do something to bring themselves to safety. And so we can say the ideal solutions bring the largest group to safety possible. So we're aiming to do things like that, where we're educating about the nervous system and what is in the best interest of everybody. Because if one group feels safe and another group feels in danger, the group that feels safe, their safety isn't secure, because now they have potential enemies, even if the other people don't want to be their enemy, you know, but their nervous system is going to feel like, I've got to protect myself. And so if you have other ideas, I'd love for you to reach out and let me know, and take those back to the Polyvagal Institute.
Beautiful. This is so important now. So important. Yeah. Thanks, Barbara. Lorraine, did you have your hand up? Hello, Lorraine.
Yes, thank you. Here, my question is that just about every one of my clients is very triggered right now about the election. And so my question is, how can I help them get to ventral vagal when the environment doesn't feel safe to them or me?
Yeah, or all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with the election in the United States, it was going to be that half the people felt safer and half the people felt more in danger. And so that's the way it is in the groups of people that I work with. Some people feel safer now. Some people feel more in danger. And we always have to think that there is physical safety. And so if your clients, and I know you know this, but I'm just going to say it for the sake of saying it out loud, if they're in physical danger, we need to work with their physical safety first. If you're in the street and a car's coming towards you, don't do deep listening, jump out of the way, right? But deeply listening actually will help people to rise to that level of ventral vagal. And then I think asking that question, what's emerging now that you're in I am, what does it connect you with inside yourself that may not have been there before? And that then will give them a path for what their next steps are, either in taking actions or in their own sense of self. You know, when we deeply listen to our kids, one of the things that happens is it increases a security of attachment, but it also, and this makes sense, knowing polyvagal theory, because they're more connected with themselves, they build a more coherent sense of self and a coherent narrative about their life. And so I'm sure that's what you're helping them, like, who am I in this situation now? You know, and what does that person do if I'm being that person that I am at a deeply felt level?
Thank you.
Yeah. Jan, I might just say one thing about my community is that on a weekly basis, I'll send out emails and we'll talk about some of these kinds of things in the emails.
Yeah.
And then I'll do a master class kind of like this once a month on Zoom. And then we have guest experts. I've invited you to come as a guest expert at some point. We haven't scheduled it yet. And then
Yeah.
we have a Facebook community as well for people to support each other. Because if parents have support, then their nervous systems can calm down, and then their caregiving brains come online. And we know what to do when our caregiving brains are online. You know, I can provide a few little things that are helpful, but that's the way that I think about how do we support parents these days, especially because the temperature can be kind of high in the public sphere on social media, at school, and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So that 𝗏𝗺𝗏 link also would take a person to that community as well.
Okay, great. So people can connect with you there, and also for clients, right? To refer people, parents that are struggling and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a number of therapists refer clients, and because then they have something they can do in between sessions to keep working on what they're learning with the therapy.
Mhm.
What a great community you have.
I know. It's really, if you just flick along, you can see all these beautiful faces. There's Susie in the second one, and you begin to just really recognize. And we have so many people now that are have just signed up to all of the embodied dialogue series. That was Rashawn's idea, to just give people that option. And so we're really developing, and you can see that there's just so much meaning in this work, right? It's so important. So the deep divides, it reminds me so much of in working with trauma for so long with people. And the more traumatized people are, the more they have these deep divides. And now the world's like that.
I just scrolled through the screen and I saw 𝗏𝗏, who's an old friend of mine, and or I'll say a longtime friend of mine. And his daughter is the director of neuroscience and human behavior at Notre Dame. And she's the one that invited me to come talk, and a person very deeply interested in how do we use our understanding of the nervous system to build safe communities, and understanding of how does things like our history of racism and slavery get embodied in us, and how do we then, what do we need to do to reckon with what's already embodied, that is just our physical nervous system legacy, and still affects us in different kinds of ways. So as I've done my own family history, I find, oh, I have these reactions that I didn't know that I had, and it's been very helpful to me.
Yeah.
So Nancy Michael, if you Google Nancy Michael, she's the director of neuroscience at Notre Dame, and doing amazing things. I know there's lots of other people on here doing amazing things too.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that we're all, we take what we're doing and bring it into every different area. And people, as you can see too, of course, all over the world. So, well, thank you everybody for coming. Who do we have next time, Rashawn? Is it Trevor? Yeah. Trevor Roca, right?
Hi.
People know Trevor?
You want this open?
Oh, who I believe is going to talk about polyvagal theory and safety, that therapy doesn't start without safety. So we're talking about that threshold, George, the shift into that ventral place. And it's similar as what you were saying, is like there's before you have that, you can say whatever you say, but it's not really going to be taken in and deeply heard until there is this connection and co-regulation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be with you.
Oh, it's been delightful to be with you and your community. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to meet everybody and talk with you.
Yeah, and for all of us to know that George is like there at the helm. And it's good for us to know who we all are as a community, right? Okay, well, everyone, be well. Please be safe as you can be. And stay connected, and we'll see you next month, if not before. Okay, thanks so much, George.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, Rashawn, for helping us. Bye, Claudia.